My dear students, Assalamu alaikum. This is your teacher, Janzib Jahan, and I am teaching you 20th century American literature. This is ENGL 4128, and in this we are going to study about the elements of American theater or American drama. So first we'll be having a look into the history. So when we talk about the American continent, it was once believed by the people staying there that America is a turtle island. So this is what is meant by the name. They believed that the continent was in shape of a turtle that was swimming in the ocean. So it was a false myth, but from there we got the name. American continent, and especially the country USA, it was a British colony, and there were 13 colonies in America, and those 13 colonies were under the influence of European countries, for example, Spain, France, and especially England. So they were all together taking the resources, the minerals, the materials, and all the products, especially gold, tobacco. So they were having these things, and they were taking all these things to England. So after the War of Independence, in which George Washington, he fought himself and became the first president of America, America got liberation and it became a separate country. It came to the map of the world as a separate country, as a separate entity. Then since it was first a place where the people of England, they would send their notorious prisoners or criminals. So Australia and America were first British prisons where they would be sending such notorious people. Afterwards, within the time span when America was not liberated, even from then, the Puritans from England, they started to arrive in America. They were quite staunch and fanatic in their rules of religion. So they established their Puritan church in America in a place called New England because so many people from England came over there. And sooner or later, all the people who came to England, who came to America from England, they all shifted in New England. So New England is basically the area which includes Salem, Massachusetts, Boston, these places. So they established their church, and Arthur Miller, with his famous The Crucible, is written about the history of Puritans. So they disliked literature, they disliked war, they disliked music, dance, singing, writing novels, and playing of little children. So they were quite fanatic in their rules. So their history is very much dominant on literature. Then World War II was a major incident that led to the present American literature. The present American literature is the outproduct of World War II because so many things were changed after that mighty war. And the modern American drama has the glimpses of that war, especially the modern American novels. The novels written by Hemingway are all about the war because he himself was a war hero. He came back from the war alive, and he wrote about pre, post, and during the war incidents in his novels. So American literature is very well connected with American history, especially the American drama. Although drama had not been a major art form in the 19th century, no type of writing was more experimental than a new drama that arose in rebellion against the stereotypical commercial stage. In the early years of 20th century, American travelings in Europe encountered an important and flourishing theatre. Returning home, some of them became active in founding the Little Theatre movement throughout the country. Freed from commercial limitations, playwrights experimented with dramatic forms and methods of production. And in time, producers, actors, and dramatists appeared who had been trained in college classrooms and community playhouses. Some little theatre group became commercial producers. For example, The Washington Square Players, founded in 1915, which became the Theatre Guild, first production in 1919. The resulting drama was marked by a spirit of innovation and by a new seriousness and maturity. So this was an evolution of the drama that they took the basics from the British literature, but then looking at their own history and their own like contemporary issues, they contributed to the 20th century drama in America. Eugene O'Neill, the most admired dramatist of the period, was a product of this movement. He worked with Provincetown players before his plays were commercially produced. His dramas were remarkable for their range. Beyond the Horizon, a play was written by him. It was first performed in 1920. Anna Christie was written by him, performed in 1921. Desires Under the Elms in 1924, and The Iceman Comes in 1946. These were all naturalistic works, while The Emperor Jones in 1920 and The Hairy Ape in 1922 made use of the expressionistic techniques developed by the German dramatist in the period of 1914 to 1924. Eugene also employed a stream of consciousness from form of psychological monologue and strange interlude, and produced a work combined with myths, family drama, and psychological analysis. And Morning Becomes Electra, and it was written in 1931. So Eugene O'Neill happens to be the chief dramatist of American literature or American theater. He wrote all sort of works. Majority of his works were written in expressionistic techniques. Some of his works were about myths, family dramas. They had psychological analysis in that. Melodramas were also written by him. So he had a variety of things that he wrote and rendered to the American drama. No other dramatist was as generally praised as Eugene O'Neill, but many others wrote plays that reflected the growth of a serious and varied drama, including Maxwell Anderson, whose verse dramas have dated badly, and Robert E. Sherwood, a Broadway professional who wrote both comedy and tragedy. Mark Connelly wrote touching fantasy in American African folk biblical play, The Green Pastures. Like O'Neill, Elmer Rice also made use of expressionistic techniques in the adding machine and naturalism in street scene. So people were there who were writing about so many issues, about expressionistic technique, about naturalism, about realism, about American and African folk tales and folklores or biblical plays. So people were writing a great deal of literature touching all the possible sides of human nature that was displayed in the contemporary time of 20th century. Radical theater experiments included so many works written in those times. The premier radical theater of the decade was the group theater, that was from 1931 to 1941 under Harlot Clermont and Lee Strasberg, which became the best known for presenting the work of the old times. In Waiting for Lefty, written in 1935, a stirring plea for labor unionism, Oudist rose the audience to an intense pitch of fervor, and in Awake and Sing, perhaps the best play of the decade, he created a lyrical work of family conflict and youthful yearning. Other important plays by Oudist for the group theatre were Paradise Lost. This is not the poem by Milton, this was a play written in 1935. He also wrote Golden Boy in 1937 and The Rocket to the Moon in 1938. Thornton Wilder used styles, setting, and poetic dialogue in Our Town, that was written in 1938, and turned to fantasy in The Skin of Our Teeth in 1942. William Servan shifted his light-hearted anarchic vision from fiction to drama with my heart in the Highlands and the time of your life. Both were written in 1939. So these depict certain other places in which the modern American dramatists they were working in the contemporary age. So the American drama, just like the British drama, they were having so many different varieties of themes, and they were writing in so many different places, in so many different genres of literature. American drama imitated English and European theatre until well into the 20th century. So before this time, the works were copied, they were imitated, or they were borrowed. So often plays from England or translated from European languages dominated theatre seasons. So whenever there were theatre seasons, people borrowed or used the plays written in English or other European languages because they were lacking certain literature. An inadequate copyright law that failed to protect and promote American dramatists worked against genuinely original drama. So there was a copyright law, but it was not sufficient enough that could protect the rights of the genuine American dramatists, so they suffered for a very long time. So did the star system, in which actors and actresses, rather than the actual plays, were given most acclaim. Americans flocked to see European actors who toured theaters in United States. In addition, imported drama like imported wine enjoyed higher status than indigenous productions. So this was the state of American drama. It was rather a plight of American drama in those times that first of all they were copying the English dramas. There was no copyright policy, and the local actors who performed in the borrowed English dramas, they got the acclaim, and the genuine actors and writers, the pure American dramatists and the writers, they were given no fame at all. And then whenever the European actors came to USA to perform their theaters there, so they captured a huge audience, which resulted in the bad plight of the genuine American dramatist who wanted to work on entirely new themes which were not copied, which were not imitated or borrowed. During the 19th century, melodramas with exemplary democratic figures and clear contrast between good and evil had been popular. Plays about social problems such as slavery also drew large audience. Sometimes these plays were adaptation of the novels like Uncle Tom's Cabin and so many others. Not until the 20th century would serious plays attempt aesthetic innovation. Popular culture showed that vital developments, however, especially in the popular variety theatre, there were so many things which were changing. Minstrel shows based on African American music and folkways performed by white characters using blackface makeup also developed original forms and expressions. So we see that some of the plays were melodramatic. They were sometimes adaptation from the novels. Sometimes they were taken from the popular culture. There was quite after some time that they worked on the serious plays. It also shows that the characters would amuse the audience using the blackface makeup to present themselves as the blacks of African tribes. So such things developed or invited huge audience, because slavery was also a big issue in those times, and since people knew the theme, they would come in crowd to watch such plays. During 1920s, Harlem, the black community situated uptown in New York City, sparkled with passion and creativity. The sounds of its black American jazz swept the United States by storm, and jazz musicians and composers like Duke Ellington became stars beloved across the United States and overseas. we can see Toni Morrison's jazz as an example, which is all about the jazz music, the popularity of the music, the popularity of the singers, composers, and the literature, which is attributed as Harlem Renaissance. It is all described by Toni Morrison in her famous novel, Jazz. Among the rich variety of talent in Harlem, many visions coexisted. There was a sympathetic novel of Harlem that gives some idea of the complex, bittersweet life of black America in face of economic and social inequality. So we see the same in Jazz, the novel by Toni Morrison, that people were suffering from this racial riot, and they were displaced from their places. They had to migrate, and many people from Virginia and so many other colonies, the states, they came to New York because it was a larger city, and it could give them a shelter. They could find jobs there. But again, we see that people like the main characters in Jazz, Violet. So Violet, who was a girl, the protagonist, the female protagonist in the novel, she was suffering because of this thing that she was a hairdresser, but she was not licensed because she was black and she was migrated. Her husband, Joe Trace, also worked as a salesman because he could not do any other job. So these were the economic and social inequalities they were facing. The poet County Cullen, a native of Harlem who was briefly married to a lady who was Dubay's daughter, wrote accomplished rhyme poetry in accepted form, which was much admired by whites. He believed that a poet should not allow race to dictate the subject matter and the style of a poem. On the other hand, the spectrum were African whites who rejected the United States in favor of Marcus Garvey's Back to Africa movement. Somewhere in between lies the work of Jane Truman, who also worked about the rights of the black. She was a champion of it. So this is all about whatever was written in Harlem Renaissance, during the Harlem Renaissance. We very well come to know that this movement, Back to Africa, was meant for this purpose, that the Negroes should be going back to their own continent. They should not be living among the whites. So for this reason, many works of literature, they were written by blacks, and they proved by writing those in Harlem Renaissance that literature was not the property of the white people. An important movement in early 20th century drama was Expressionism. Expressionist playwrights tried to convey the dehumanizing aspect of 20th century technological society through such devices as minimal scenery, telegraphic dialogue, and the talking machines, and especially the characters portrayed as types rather than individuals. So unlike Chaucer, who writes about types and individuals both, they preferred types more and paid less attention to the individual. Eugene O'Neill was a chief protagonist in the Expressionist movement, so his plays are considered to be the plays of Expressionist movement. Miller's stage directions, like Arthur Miller, for his earlier play, Death of a Salesman, which is a hallmark of American drama, described an expressionist set, a shell-like and a transparent family home with no walls. When the action is set in the present, the characters behave as though they are in the rooms with walls, and when the action is set in the past, they walk through the empty space into another space on the stage, giving the impression that the events on the stage are like a dream. Whereas A View from a Bridge play had been essentially realist in its structure and language. Salesman avoids the naturalism that had gripped the American stage up to that point, instead of adopting the expressionist use of the stage as a symbol for the dreamlike nature of Willie's life and everyday American life in general. So Willie was the salesman in Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. So he is a person who is suffering from his time space, because a lot of time has been has been spent since he was working as a salesman, and now salesmanship is not that lucrative and is not that profit making business. So he is living in illusions, and his American dreams shatter. We see that the play is an expressionist movement, that whenever the characters are living in present in the play, there are walls on the stage. But if when they are shown to be talking or living in the past, because in the play the main character frequently goes to his past memories. So in his past, where he finds his adult children being uh, quite tiny in age, so there we see no walls at all. So this is one way of expressionist movement. Though again there is naturalism, which came afterwards. Realism also came afterwards. Three vital figures of 20th century drama were American drama were Eugene O'Neill, the German Bertolt Brecht, and the Italian Luigi Prandello. O'Neill's body of plays in many forms, uh, naturalistic, expressionistic, symbolic, psychological, these won him Nobel Prize in Literature in 1936 and indicated the coming of age of American drama. Brecht wrote dramas of ideas, usually promulgating a socialist or Marxist theory. In order to make his audience more intellectually receptive to his theses, he endeavored by using expressionist techniques to make them continually aware that they were watching a play, not experiencing reality. For Prandello, too, it was paramount to fix an awareness of his plays as theatre. Indeed, the major philosophical concern of his dramas is the difficulty of differentiating between illusions and reality. So, all these things by German Brecht and Italian Prandello, they were quite effective on American literature. They also affected the American drama. World War II and its attendant horrors produced a widespread sense of the utter meaninglessness of human existence. We find the concept of lost generation and nihilism in Hemingway's novels. So, this sense was not only in his novels but also the widespread American dramas of that time. The sense is brilliantly expressed in the body of the plays that have come to be known as collectively as the theatre of absurd. By abandoning traditional devices of drama and including illogical plot development, meaningful dialogue, and intelligible characters, the absurd playwrights sought to convey modern humanity's feeling of bewilderment, alienation, and despair. So the sense that reality is itself unreal. So in their plays, human beings often they are portrayed as dupes, clowns, who although not without dignity are at the mercy of the forces that are indestructible. So, when World War came, it came with such horrors that people they felt that their life has become meaningless and they will no longer live. Oh, their sense of uh, living or their charm of living has ended, because those people who were there during the war, they felt the horrors, and the term is too much. They felt that they are not going to live that far, that they will be able to come back to society. They enjoyed the maximum pleasures of life there within the war, and they got bored of them. And when they came back to their routine life, all those who escaped the death from the war, they were all the lost generation. So Gertrude Stein said that you are all lost generation. So this term was coined by him. So this was adopted by Hemingway and so many other dramatists. We see in those dramas that people are living an aimless life. Then came the theater of absurd there. So we have gone through Waiting for Godot in English theater. So here, the American theater also worked in the same way. that we find the dialogue so meaningful, but the plot is illogical. Like a logical plot development is there. There is meaningful dialogue, but the characters are sometimes intelligible, sometimes they're behaving in different ways. Uh, like we find in them that practically nothing is changing. In absurd playwrights, the dialogues are intelligible, they are meaningful, but they are not changing. There is repetition of dialogues. There is a bewilderment we find in the characters. So we this is basically to convey the feeling that in fact the humanity is suffering from bewilderment or alienation and despair, because they're all the time waiting for someone to come and save them from all what is going on. So boredom is also a big theme in the plays of theatre of absurd. So all these things are depicted, and human being is shown that they're like clowns who are waiting for someone to come and save them, or they're waiting, or they are going through whatever fate has written for them, or fate has woven for them rather. So, if you have studied literature at all, you must be knowing what symbolism is. So, symbolism is a technique by which one thing stands for something else. For example, if a person is running and going towards a light from darkness, it means that a person is going towards betterment. So, this is a symbolic usage of the light. So, symbolism occurs quite a bit in American dramas too. Tennessee Williams, the glass manager, tells us the tale of a Wingfield family mother, Amanda, son Tom, and daughter Laura, who have been left behind their husband and father. A sense of disappointment is there in the play, as the family often finds itself short on money, and Laura, who wears a brace on her leg, does not have any men interested in dating or marrying her. Or gentlemen callers, for example, they're not interested in her, as her mother refers to them. So there are certain things or certain places where we find symbolism. Glass Menagerie is full of symbolism. Hemingway's novels, they are symbolic. But since we're talking about the American drama, so Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman is symbolic. We find Crucible symbolic to a huge extent. There is huge symbolism used in Long Day's Journey into Night and Morning Becomes Electra by Eugene O'Neill. So, a literary motif consists of repeated symbols or reference to a theme that occur throughout a particular work. We find there are certain literary motifs too, along with the symbols used in the American plays. In Arthur Miller's play Death of a Salesman, a major theme is the decline and the death of the Lowman family's dream to achieve success and to stand out as a special and remarkable. Note that the theme is the main idea of the literary work, and it includes the important ideas evoked by the work. So there are certain common motives or themes and symbols which are used. American Dream is a main symbol or theme which is used there, or like a change of like people from past to present in shape of American Depression. So American Depression was a stage that came when there was economic instability in America, and people like Willie Loman, whose spellings are Loman, and actually he feels like Lowman, that he is a low man and he is not given importance anymore in the words. So he represents so many people who were suffering from these themes. Apart from them, there are certain other themes on which we'll be talking about in coming slides. Experimentalism was another good technique. American drama can foremost be known for its experimental technique in dramatic forms. American drama would not be known as it is now for its different styles, characters, sets, without its shifting, setting it apart from the last decades of 19th century American theatre. So we find that there was a split in that, there was a change in both the century theatres and dramas. which had been largely given over to the melodramas with naturalistic acting styles. However, early modern American playwrights drew their influences from the European constructs, such as those of Chekhov, uh, intent on representing life within drama in a more realistic style. Uh, this is known as modern realism. Uh, it represented everyday reality in a style that would seem familiar to the audience that came to see the plays. The style was carried throughout the places and particularly became more popular during increasing social and cultural change, such as escalation of immigration and poverty, women's rights, depression, crisis in religion, and the mechanical development of American and the continual strive towards American dream. Realism had an influence on the American stage in this period, but many uh, like uh, people they elaborate realism in this term. So this was certain place which makes a differentiation, experimentalism is a certain theme or certain change in American drama that separates the 19th century American theater from the 20th century. So the melodramas of 19th century, they were changed, the actors were changed, they stopped copying the foreign literature and the foreign actors. They worked on their genuine works, genuine and contemporary issues. Modern realism was there. Since they were experimenting, so they brought certain new things in that. They talked about the contemporary issues, such as there were so many people, there were migration that we also see in the novel Jazz, and people waiting for American Dream. We'll be studying what American Dream is. Poverty was an issue. Women's rights was a major issue. Sylvia Plath writes about it. You must have read in her poems. So Sylvia Plath talks about the women right. Depression is there, religious crisis, and the mechanical development of America, like the materialistic attitude in the people. So these were all the issues in 20th century American drama and the 20th century American contemporary society, which is represented by the American dramatists. From the previous slide, we can come to know that realism planted the seeds for many American core values. Like whatever was going on in America was represented better in 20th century American literature, and that was represented in true and realistic way. That is why it is called the genuine literature. The American novel and its tradition, they have a specific role of realism because it tells about specific social, political, artistic characteristics which set apart American novels and dramas from other genres. Though poetry, poets were writing something about realism, they were writing very realistic poetry. For example, the poems of Adrian Rich and Sylvia Plath, they talk about the plight of average American person and the issues with him or her. But the dramas, chiefly, they were working more on realistic issues. For example, as we have read before, that poverty was a common issue, then racial issues were there, then shifting of like a mass, like we can call it mass migration of people, a displacement of people from one place to another. Then a criticism on the blacks, which was all the time going on, and then people suffering from the economical crisis, and the women liberation. It was also a common theme. The end of slavery was also a common theme. So we find certain themes that we have talked just now in the novel Jazz too. Slavery is also a big theme in Jazz. So all the genres of American literature, they were in 20th century especially, they were talking more about the realistic elements of society. So they forgot about copying the European dramatist and copying the melodramatic art. So they came to the naturalism, they came to realism. We have been talking about American Dream. So American Dream is the belief that anyone, regardless of where they were born or what class they were born in, can attain their own version of success in a society. where upward mobility and progress is possible for everyone. The American dream is achieved through sacrifice, risk taking, hard work, but there's no place of chance in that. That by chance you can get all these things. So, in Death of a Salesman, we see the same thing. That Willy Loman, the protagonist, he is wanting a success in society, since everyone can have success, but he is disillusioned by his rigid character that is not changing himself, and is believing that though time has changed, but things have never changed, and he can still win over the people by talking to them, because salesmen are best in their talking. So, but in America, there was a pace in society, and people were more believing in hard work that we were just talking about. So that talking was replaced by hard work, and Willy Loman suffers because he is old, so he cannot have hard work, because he even forgets when he's driving that he is driving. His kids are good for nothing, and they do have the talking sense inherited from their father. But the time has changed, and this time is for hard work now. And since they're not working hard, they're not getting something good in life. So American Dream is belief that everyone can get good results, provided that you're working hard, which was not done by Willy Loman and his sons. So when we talk about the modern American dramas, we find certain psychological elements in them too. For example, Oedipus complex, primarily a theory by Freud, uh, admired or taken from King Oedipus from the Greek myths. So it is a psychological flaw or illness in which a person, a male basically, hates his father but loves his mother, so is more prone towards his mother. In the same way, Electra complex is also drawn from mythology and taken from Freud's theory that a girl hates her mother but loves her father, so she is more prone towards her father. So we find these two things in, like mostly in Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night, and Morning becomes Electra. And rest of many American plays depict these issues. So we find the main characters, that all the male characters in both the plays, they hate their father to a huge extent, and they like their mother. They like their mother because of her suffering, because of her time that she spent, and the way she brought them up, and so many other things. So is the case with the girl. So girls in both the plays, they like their father. They hate their mother because they feel that she does not deserve their father. The complexes are very much there in the American plays. Then we find split personalities. We find split personality in Willy Loman in Death of a Salesman. We find split personality in Jamie's character in Long Day's Journey into Night. Mary is full of split personality in the same play. So there are split personalities which are like they may be split in two ways. For example, there are certain characters like which I mentioned. They are split in a way that they start feeling like someone else. They start hating the person they love. They start loving the person they hate. But there are certain people who are showing to be like who are frenemies in a way. They are friend like enemies. They know what they're doing. They're happy at your face, but in heart they're your enemies. So such themes or such elements are also there. Paranoia is a major theme in these plays. The modern American society is suffering from this. So you may see that so many American movies which are made, especially after 20th century or after World War, they are based on paranoia that people do not trust each other. They are hateful of each other, or they are afraid of each other. Jealousy is one of the major themes or psychological elements. That people are jealous. People are not accepting what the other person is gaining. Even the family members are hating each other for the fact. Hatred is one of the common themes in American society, which is depicted through the American plays. That people hate each other for so many known and unknown reasons. Then major themes, as we talked, slavery was a major theme. Drugs has been a great theme. All the major 20th century American plays, you will find the role of drugs, that people are into it because drugs was and is prevalent and replete in American society. Alcohol is a big issue. It has been a big issue. When we talk about TB in America, it was incurable in the time of the long day's journey into night. So alcohol was consumed in abundant quality or abundant quantity by the people there. So they talk about alcohol. They prefer to go to bar rooms to socialize with the people, and alcohol is the thing that brings them together. They feel so. Horse. So they are the part of community, like which are considered to be characterless people. So they are from one of us, and they are the out product of the society itself. So their role in modern American plays is like not undermined. They're very much there in most of the plays, in the shape of mistresses, in the shape of whores. So we find that women are treated in a bad way. They're depicted in a bad way. So the treatment of women that is given to the female characters is not very good. Rather, the female characters are not that strong in modern American plays as they were in the British plays or the old American plays. So, because we find in the society that since women were talking about the liberation, they got the liberation, but at least we find that in American society they lost their respect. I'm not commenting on the present status of the female community, but I'm talking about the aftermaths of the 20th century. So in 20th century, as we find the role of women depicted by Hemingway, we find the role of women depicted by Eugene O'Neill, by Arthur Miller. So we come to know that they are not given strong roles. Maybe the male chauvinistic society did not consider them worthy enough. So I'm not going into this debate about being feminist or anti-feminist, but I'm just commenting the role of women in 20th century American literature. So these were the major issues or events in 20th century American drama. So I hope you liked it or understood it. So we basically, in this video lecture, we begin with a summary of the history of American continent, and then we talked about the arrival of people into America, and then when they were settled here, they started working and copying the British or European literature, and they started calling the actors from different other European countries to perform, and they were succeeded. The genuine American playwrights, they were neglected, and then certain movements came, like realism came there. After that, we find that expressionist movement came, and then people tended towards the seriousness. So melodramatic plays were ended, and people came to the serious plays, and then came Eugene O'Neill and Arthur Miller and so many other people in American literature who wrote quite comprehensive plays. And then they depicted the real plight of the people there, which brought more and more people towards stage and theaters, and thus the American play established its fame as its genuine works were shown to the people. So now the American playwrights no more copy the English or European plays. They have so many diverse themes, like they talk about women emancipation, they talk about slavery, they talk about so many other issues with American society, they talk about American depression, American dream. We see the plenty of good works that are written on based on these themes. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you understood all these things. If not, do watch the video lecture again. You will get it. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. Allah Hafiz. These are the references quoted. You can go to them and you can get plentiful knowledge from these things which I have already told and which I could not. So you can get all the ideas from here.